Well, good afternoon, everybody, except for folks in Alaska and Hawaii, in which case, good morning. Today, we're here to talk about five common cybersecurity mistakes in healthcare. Um, and it's really nice to have you here. And I hope that your August is starting off well. One of the things to know before we start is, we travel around and we talk to a lot of healthcare organizations. I was just at American Hospital Association conference, which was here in Seattle, which had big hospitals, like really, really big organizations. And earlier this year, I was at the American Hospital Association Rural Conference, which had smaller organizations. And I got to tell you, big organizations, small organizations, in the end, the problems are very similar. Now, some have more people to tackle it, some have more money to tackle it, more resources to tackle it, and the like. But the problems are the same, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Is those issues. Now, one thing to know about us, if you don't know us, Critical Insight defends critical services against cyber attacks. Critical services include all of you, everyone in healthcare, anyone who's patient focused. That's what we do. That's why we come to work every day. We're here to defend you against cyber attacks. Now, a couple of quick notes. Number one, there is a chat on the right hand side. Feel free to write in, ask questions. My favorite thing to do is to interrupt our presenters and panelists with your questions. So as you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Be good to have that. Also, go ahead and let us know where you're joining from. I see Anthony is here from Northern Washington State. And you can see where other folks are joining from. Always good to have you. Second is everybody joining will get a recording. And also, we're going to send out the deck. Brad, who I'll introduce you to in a second, has created a deck with a lot of information. And I know folks are going to say, "Hey, can I look at that deck later? I want to be able to share it with my team." We'll send out a PDF of the deck afterwards. I see somebody joining from Greensboro, North Carolina. I am headed to North Carolina just in a couple of weeks. All right. So the main presenter today is Brad Swanson. Brad is vCISO for us and healthcare organizations, and he's worked in all sorts of different kinds of organizations, whether it be healthcare, municipalities, but all sorts of critical infrastructure organizations. And he spent 28 years doing this. He's going to be the main presenter, and then chiming in today, Mike Hamilton and Fred Langston, both who co-founded the company. Fred is now our chief product officer. Mike is the CISO, and my name is Jake Milstein, and I run our events and run marketing and color commentary. Brad, take it away.
Excellent. Thanks for that introduction, Jake. And thanks to everybody that's attending today. Really good to see everybody here. We're going to talk a little bit today about what 5 kind of downfalls are for security. Some of the things that we see as we talk with different healthcare orgs, some of the traps that they fall into, or things that they don't really think about in the day-to-day operational security stuff. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing well. What are things that are working for us, and what are the things that we need to keep doing? We're going to talk about these main 5 common things that we've seen with healthcare that could be shored up or improved. We're going to look at a couple of example breaches as well, that not doing these 5 common mistakes have led to some breaches. We're going to look at 3 example breaches, kind of talk about those a little bit. We're going to talk about what do we do to improve and what the forward-looking threat landscape looks like, because that landscape is continually evolving. We need to evolve with that to kind of head off those threats. And then we'll have some time at the end for a little bit of Q&A for everybody. So starting off, what do we do well as far as healthcare goes? The first thing that we do very well is like the day-to-day operational stuff, kind of keeping the lights on, spinning up a new user, or, making sure that the backups ran. Things that are things that we do on a very regular basis. So they become almost like ingrained into our culture and into what we do. These are things that are very important, but it's things that are easy for us. The next thing we do is we look really good when other people are looking at us, right? The main thing that I'm thinking of here is audit season. Whenever there's any kind of an audit, HIPAA, high tech, any kind of reviews like that, we always do good. We make sure our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed, and that we are really kind of trying to shine. When audit season goes away and the auditors leave, sometimes we tend to slack off a little bit. But for the time being, when the auditors are here, we really shine and excel. Any kind of a task that is routine or easy or something we can knock out quickly, we're good at doing those. It's something that's on our plate. Maybe we have a ticket for it. We can knock that out fast, close that ticket, and move on. It shows that we're doing a lot of work, and we're all very busy. Nobody is contesting that by any stretch of the imagination. We do these easier tasks very quickly, and it makes us feel good. We're accomplishing things, so we do those quite fast. Kind of the low hanging fruit, as it were. And then anything that's well known, if there's a lot of research that's been done on an issue, we get pretty good at addressing that. When Spectre came out, the Spectre vulnerability came out, there was a lot of research that the chip manufacturers did on that, and they provided a lot of research out to all of us. As a result, we were able to address those things. Log4j, another good example. There's a lot of research done on this. It kind of came in a little bit piecemeal, but once we had all that information, okay, now it's very easy to address this. Let's go out and get this fixed. We know that we have to get this rectified. So things that are well known, maybe it's something that happened to another hospital system or another healthcare provider, and they've done some research and they've shared indicators of compromise with us. Things like that are easy for us to track down. Now, as we move forward, we want to talk a little bit about what are the 5 places where we fall short a little bit. And the first thing is we put way too much trust in what we like to refer to as blinky boxes. You can buy a box. Barracuda Email Gateway as an example. Great product. I like the Barracuda products, but if you don't configure it, it's just a blinking box in a rack. We might think that based on marketing spiel that we read from different manufacturers, different vendors, that if we buy this blinking box and rack it, all of our problems will be over. Nothing could be further from the truth. Blinky boxes are good. They do have a place and a use, but it really requires us to set that box up properly. And that kind of brings us into number 2 here, which is not properly configuring anything that's off the shelf product or a blinky box or any kind of cloud-based solution that we have. We get marketed to all the time. I'm sure many of you get phone calls from vendors saying, hey, we have this great new product. You really need it. It's going to save the day. Well, that sounds great. We really want the day saved. If we have a product that's going to take some of our workload off and make our lives a little easier, I mean, we're all for that, right? We all know there's a finite number of hours in the day, finite amount of dollars in the budget. Anything that we can find that makes us more effective is a win-win, except when it's not configured properly. And that's the thing that a lot of vendors won't tell you is how much time goes into it. What are the efforts and what is the lift to properly configure these items? There's a lot that goes into products. Like in a previous life, before I joined the Critical Insight family, I was a manager of threat intelligence and incident response. We had some really good threat intelligence products, but it took us 3-4 months to get them dialed in, to give us useful information that wasn't making more work for us. You need to spend that time to dial these things in. The same thing goes for a blinky box. I can buy a really good piece of equipment, rack it, fire it up, and it's going to do a default job for me, right? Because I haven't tuned it, I haven't tweaked it at all. You really need to spend the time going in and tuning and tweaking these things. And cloud providers are the same thing. We've heard several times from people, oh, we don't have to worry about these particular controls in our audit because we offsource that to AWS. They're responsible. It's really not an excuse, though, to just push everything off onto Amazon. You really need to know, what are they doing with your data? You should have a vested interest in these controls that you say, okay, these fall to Amazon because they're holding our data. But that's the key thing. They're holding your data. What are they doing with that data? How is it protected? Are they meeting their obligations to you? A lot of places will do a vendor review and they bring a vendor on board, and then they never go back and review that. It's very important, on an annual basis, go back and just check in with your vendors. Make sure that they're still fulfilling their obligations to you in the manner that they agreed to when you first started doing business with them. It's really crucial because vendors change processes. It happens all the time. We've seen it at a lot of organizations. We've seen it here at Critical Insight. We do annual vendor reviews, or more often if a vendor has some sort of an issue, to make sure that our vendors are still providing what they promised to provide us. So make sure that you're analyzing your cloud stuff and configuring it. Same with any off-the-shelf products that you buy from a vendor or any Blinky boxes. They only work by default when you first roll them out. They really need to be tuned. Number 3 is not properly asking for what we need. And I myself have been guilty of this in the past. I'd really like to go take this SANS course. It would really help me, but it's $7,000. They'll never approve that. I'm not even going to ask. Always ask for something you need. And when you ask for something you need, whether it's budgetary money for new hardware or a new product, if it's headcount, if it's training, no matter what it is, always ask. And when you ask, say, this is how much it's going to cost, or this is what it's going to entail. These are the benefits from it. Make sure to always point out what those benefits are if we get this. This is what you're getting for your money. Also point out the risks if you don't have that system. Maybe you need a new SIEM, and if you don't get it, you're not going to be able to analyze and have some sort of AI kind of looking at some of your alerts and floating the important stuff up to the top. Make sure that risk is known. If we don't get this, we're going to need more people working or more hours, or we're not going to catch everything. That way, when the folks that kind of hold that bucket of money are looking at it, they can say, okay, this is what we're going to get for our money. This is the potential risk if we don't spend this money. If you just go and ask for money and say, hey, I need money, or I need 4 more people on the team this year, without providing benefits and risks, it makes it very easy for folks to say no, because they don't really understand what those risks could be. They're not security people. We all have a vested interest in security. When we're doing our jobs well, nobody really knows that we've done anything at all, because it's all kind of behind the scenes unless something bad happens. We want to let them know what the positives are that they don't see, and what the negatives are that they might see if we aren't able to get what we need. So always ask. Don't be afraid to ask. The worst that'll happen is somebody will tell you no, and you're no worse off than you are now. But always ask for what you need. Number 4 is not leveraging a robust asset inventory. I was dealing recently with a hospital in Illinois, and they had no idea what they had as far as assets. Many of these assets were internet connected with default usernames and passwords. Some of them had not been patched since the day they were new. So a lot of risk there. But they didn't even know what they had. So it made it very difficult for that team to go out and check those things, to make sure things were patched, to make sure default passwords and things like that had been changed. There are some really good programs out there. I want to try and be brand agnostic and vendor agnostic in this. But there are some really good products out there. And if you reach out to us, we're happy to kind of discuss some of those that will help you manage that inventory. Not only will they find all the devices on your network for you, they can check patch levels for you. They can test them for default passwords. So it's going to be really, really beneficial to be able to have that asset inventory. And then finally, don't become paralyzed from a fear of being overwhelmed. There's a lot of work to do. We are all very busy, but don't let it intimidate you. Just dive in, grab a piece, knock it out, and keep on going. It's like the old adage of eating an elephant.
And wait, and so one quick thing on that, about being intimidated. Look, between Fred and I and Mike also, we talk to IT directors in all sorts of places and all sorts of, just because you have the job of IT director or CISO or CIO, your counterparts also don't know everything. I think we've seen that, right, Fred?
Yeah. So there's a question there, Jake?
No. I mean, I think, the ability to reach out, the ability to, say, hey, I don't know everything, is something that's really important for folks, because, just because you have the job doesn't mean you know everything.
Yeah. Well, I certainly don't know everything in this space, and I've been doing it 30 years, and I have a whole team of experts that I lean on every day. So you have to have a team behind you, or you can't pull this off. Nobody can do
Yeah.
it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and along with that, technology continues to change really fast. I'm still stuck at like software defined networks. I'm not even catching up to AI yet by a long shot.
All right, Brad, 3 example breaches.
Yes, we're going to talk about 3 example breaches here quickly. I want you to think to yourselves, if any of these breaches happen to you, how could it have happened? What would be lost? What could you do to prevent it? What kind of an impact would this have on your organization? How would your organization move forward? And also kind of think about these things as we talk about these upcoming these breaches that have happened recently. So the first one is one touch point. And so what OTP did is they were like they did mailings and printings that would be sent out to patients of various healthcare orgs. There was a leak that was identified. OTP investigated, but said, not a big deal. Shortly after their investigation, over 30 healthcare providers who are clients started to say, hey, we've had data breaches of patient records and medical information. What's going on? OTP at that point said, oh, yeah, we had this thing. We didn't think it was a big deal, but I guess it was. And so now all these clients are filing class action lawsuits against OTP. So not only does OTP have the cost of their investigation, the remediation of this, the reputational damage, but now they have additional financial impact of class action lawsuits. These clients are saying that they didn't safeguard sensitive medical data, and they didn't. This data was leaked. This is why it's so important for you to review your vendors and to really say, has your process changed? Do we need to know about these changes? Is the way that you're handling our data different than when we first, went through and did a proof of concept with you? Then we have St. Margaret's Health. Now, St. Margaret's Health has kind of a special place in the list. They had a ransomware attack in 2021, that affected 2.6 million people. They couldn't submit during the ransomware incident. They couldn't submit any claims to insurance companies, to Medicaid, to Medicare. And this went on for months and months as a result of their systems being locked down. This went on to kind of compound what they're already having some issues. COVID-19 hit everybody very hard. I don't have to tell any of you that. You're all aware of the impact that COVID had. They had staff shortages. There's still places. I'm outside in Nevada in the desert. We have tons of staff shortages in the medical field out here. And so this ransomware compounded all that, and St. Margaret's went out of business. Last month, they closed their doors for good. They were done, shut down. What this resulted in, not only did everybody at that particular hospital lose their positions, but now their patient base has to travel up to a half an hour away to get to the nearest emergency room. If you're having a heart attack or a stroke or something like that, 30 minutes, that's a make or break amount of time. That's bad juju. So
yeah, if I could jump in here for just a sec, I think that last point is one that is being made a lot in public reporting now, is that these events have a regional impact. Yes, St. Margaret's in Illinois, is Illinois, right? They had to close their doors. And with the way that we run healthcare in this country, with the way that insurance companies pay for things after the fact, and margins are very low, and nurses are tired of getting yelled at, and so they have to hire traveling nurses because everybody quit. Everybody is on razor thin financial footing right now. So an event like this, has the potential to take down a hospital that's on the financial ropes, but the knock on is the entire region is going to be impacted by this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that that I've heard from somebody who knows some stuff about that case is, they had counted on insurance to take care of it. And Fred, you and I have both seen insurance. Insurance does not cover the entire impact of a ransomware attack.
No, and in particular, there's bifurcating now into 2 types of policies, right? You have a cyber liability policy that is, if your breach then impacts another entity, then you're covered. But then there's data breach insurance as well, which covers the cost of paying for monitoring and investigation. So now there's two types of insurance. So you got to understand what you're trying to cover in the process, right? So that's significant. The hard part is getting qualifying now for insurance. And then the premiums, of course, are through the roof, and the deductibles are also through the roof. So it's a tough time to get insurance. And again, if you cannot prove that you've maintained some standard of care, the insurance companies have come to the point where they're going to be saying, no, we're not going to pay. For example, you said you had multi-factor authentication. You did not, or you did not have it everywhere is a good example. I said yes because I had it on 365, but I should have said no because I also didn't have it on my cloud assets. I didn't have it for administrative access. I didn't have it on the VPN, right? So you end up getting denied because you thought you met a particular requirement.
And let's remember too, from Brad's previous slide, the class action business coming in. This is mainly because of the privacy laws that are being developed in states. So California Consumer Privacy Act, and Ohio just got one, and these have this private right of action clause in them. And that's why these class actions come in after the fact. And, you lost records that belongs to another company. Yes, but there's also the privacy aspect of that. And so the consumers who have been harmed by the disclosures of those records also form a class. And the Federal Trade Commission is aggressively enforcing the False Claims Act, to Fred's point. So when something like this happens, it impacts regionally. You could close. Even if you don't, you're going to get your pants suit off you, and fines from FedGov.
Yep.
I think
we're doing it wrong.
3 weeks. We're at now 3 weeks, and you will have at least 3 class actions lawsuits if you have a published data breach. There's an industry now, an industry that will crank these out within 3 weeks, and you will be drawn into it within that short period of time.
For sure. All right, Brad, what's the third example?
So the third one is going to be Managed Care of North America. So MCNA was primarily a dental healthcare organization. They got popped between February 26th and March 7th. 8.8 million Americans affected. A lot of kids, which is good. They don't have a credit history yet. The bad actors can take and build that up. It's a fresh, clean slate. Name, social security numbers, their insurance info. Anybody that had a driver's license, all their dental care records, all that was leaked. The direct cause has not been disclosed, only that a criminal accessed our systems without our permission. So this could lead
as opposed to having given a criminal permission.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, Mike, here's a password. Come hack me. Yeah. And this again, this is going to lead to things like class action suits. I worked for an organization prior to joining the CI family. We had a breach. We had multiple class action lawsuits because our stock dipped $2 for one day, and then it came right back the next day. So nobody lost anything, but they still used it as an excuse to file. And some insurers, it's really not super prevalent, but make sure that you read your policies. Don't just get the thing, sign it, and you're done. Read the clauses in your insurance policy. Read what riders are included. There are some insurance companies that will state that ransomware is an act of war. If they can show that it was a Russian APT or a Chinese APT that distributed that ransomware, they might try and say, or that malware, they might try and come back and say, well, this is an act of war, we don't have to pay. Very few and far between, but still worth reading your policy over. So what do we do to get better? How do we improve? The good news is there is a way to improve. First of all, find your voice. If you have a budget need, make sure that you're talking about it. Let people know. Again, let leadership know, what is the benefit if we get this money? How are we going to make ourselves more secure and save us a whole lot of pain and money and possibly having to close down in the long run? If they don't approve, say, hey, we understand if you can't approve it, but just understand we're going to have this additional risk that we're going to need to do something with, compensating controls or accept the risk or what have you if we don't get this, get this dealt with. If you see anything that's not ordinary, say something to somebody. It's the old adage of see something, say something. Especially things like phishing emails. Don't think, oh, I got a phishing email, I'll delete it. Or I got a text message from the hospital administrator, I'll just delete it. Let somebody in security know, because it could be a more widely spread attack on your organization. You might not be the only one that gets it. There might be 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 people that have gotten that message. We have to get it right every single time. The bad actors, they only have to get it right once. One person clicks, that's it, it's done. It doesn't matter how careful the other 99 people were if one person clicks. So let somebody know, hey, this is bad. I wanted to let you know. They can then send a warning out to the rest of the organization and say, hey, if you see this, it's not real, don't click. Don't be afraid or embarrassed to ask for help. Being able to ask for help when you don't know something or when you need assistance, that's a strength, not a weakness. None of us came into this world knowing anything about security or threat actors or any of what we do. We all had to learn it, and we're all on a continuous learning journey. I've been doing this for 28 years. I'm in my mid 50s. I still learn something new every single day. So don't be afraid to ask for help. I ask for help all the time. Be able to find your voice and say, hey, I need a hand. And then when possible, if you see something that hits your organization, let other area healthcare orgs know, hey, we just saw this specific kind of attack. Here's some IOCs that we're willing to share. Nobody's asking you to give up the secret sauce, but if we help each other, it makes us stronger as a unit than we are individual.
Yeah, one of the things, Brad, that I've seen work really well is, since we do security for so many healthcare organizations, we pay attention to what's happening at one and tell another. We, our security operations center sends out, vulnerability alerts to customers, but it's sort of that, and then we do these webinars, right? And one of the things we see in some of our webinars is people sharing information in the chat, or asking for contact information or something, because creating that community, I think, is really super duper important. I do want to touch on the first one here. So the budget ask. Fred, you and I have been in a million conversations where a CFO, a board member says, hey, what's the ROI of security? Essentially that's their question, right? If I get this, what do I get out of it? How do you prepare for that, Fred?
Yeah, well, you're going to talk about risk management, and the impacts. In particular, you want to focus on impacts that are tangible to the CFO. Our revenue stream will be diminished or hampered for the entire Q3 if we have a breach, and we're going to spend all our time responding to that. Come up with, what does this scenario actually mean? It's not, hey, breach notification. It's not, hey, we had SQL injection. It's, hey, our medical record system is going to be down and we're going to be transferring patients. Tell the CMO, how is he going to run an operation if I'm having to move all my patients to another hospital? So it's get down and dirty and pull up the newspaper, Google it. You can come up with, I don't have to do scary stuff. Just show them a bunch of news articles to what happened to organizations just like them. That's the best way. And I do want to point one other thing out that was interesting last week. It got pulled out of a congressional bill, but they were trying to add a new requirement saying that if you're a publicly held company, which may not be applicable here, but it still trickles down, that you have to have somebody with cybersecurity expertise on the board of directors. That is a
or at least advising the board of directors.
No, actually on the board of directors was last. Yes. You had to have credentials and be a cybersecurity, have expertise to be on the board. Didn't make it, but the concept here clearly is the board needs to wake up to the risks that they're facing. Now, if you're a critical access hospital in a rural area, your board is made up of the local school principal and the local banker and the local hardware store operator and their local citizens. These folks do not have a business background. It is very difficult to explain to them that this is real. It's going to happen if you do not take steps, and potentially you could lose your entire hospital, as we saw with St. Mark's.
Yeah, I mean, I like what Joe is saying in the chat here. It's not ROI, but rather cost avoidance and pain avoidance. For sure. Mike, you were going to say?
Yeah, well, the interesting, the thing that's starting to happen more and more now, and this is as evidenced by what's going on with the solar winds folks, right? Remember them? Yeah, they're all being accused of negligence. And so when you're speaking with the person who is in a position to authorize the allocation of resources to address an identified risk, if you're doing this properly and there's a governance organization and you can bubble this up on its way to the board and you present that risk, they're perfectly okay to say, we will accept that risk. And then their fingerprints are on it. So, you can make your ROI. You can say this will damage revenue. This will impact patient care. We will have to redirect. It will have a regional impact, and your ass might go to jail. And that last one is going to get them to listen.
And, Brad put it on the slide, as well as the risk of not approving. So, Brad, I know you're aligned on that one. So how else do we improve, Brad?
Right. So, hardware solutions are not bad solutions as long as we understand their function and properly configure them. We talked about this earlier as one of the five main things. Just because you have a cool box that does a lot of neat stuff, it still needs to be configured to your environment. Every environment's a little bit different. What worked for this hospital in Peoria is not going to work for this hospital in Missouri. Different layouts, different landscapes. So make sure that you're configuring your stuff. Practice continuous review and improvement. Just because something is working well today doesn't mean it's going to remain working well. There might be a new threat that comes out that bypasses that particular protective device that you have or protective process or what have you. Just because a vendor meets your requirements today doesn't mean a year down the road their practices are going to be the same and they're still going to meet your needs. So always review and improve, and continuous is kind of the key word there. And this is not only your external folks, but your internal processes as well. And then never assume you're not a target. Even the smallest healthcare firms get popped, either targeted or blast radius stuff. Maybe you do business with a much larger third-party firm and they get hit and that trickles down to you. You weren't the original target, but you're caught up in that kind of that blast radius. So you always have the potential to be on somebody's radar, either directly or indirectly,
and in
indirectly.
And in the configuration thing, Fred and John Luke Peck. So John Luke Peck does he's head of incident response for us. We just did a webinar with him about O365 configurations. People think, hey, I'm going to get O365, I'm going to put it in, it'll be properly configured for security. Fred, no, it's not.
Yeah. So this is one thing I can't express more strongly. If you're putting a budget together, for example, and if I were to review your budget and you say, I'm buying technology X and I'm getting subscription Y and I'm getting module Z and that's my solution. That's not a solution. That's a hardware purchase list. That's it. Your solution is people. Your solution is the people that are going to run this and they're going to manage it and maintain it. That's where your ongoing long-term costs are going to be, and that's where your benefit comes. So if I see a budget item and it's a bunch of hardware, I'm going, no, this is not a budget item. Your budget item includes all the people to get some value out of this. That is missing continuously. And the ability and the expertise it takes to get the most out of these solutions requires the ability to be able to do fine-grained configuration. Right? So operating these tools is a skill unto itself. Using these tools, a separate additional skill unto itself.
Yeah, and we do a lot of O365 assessments for our clients and partners. And the one thing that we hear the most after we deliver the report, after doing the assessment of their O365 environment, is, wow, I had no idea. There's a lot that goes into that is not secure, off the shelf for each person's environment. Again, every environment's a little different. Like Fred was saying, you do this hardware list. To me, it's like a Christmas list. You put a whole bunch of things on your Christmas list for toys, but you don't put batteries at the bottom. So Santa doesn't bring in the batteries, and those batteries being the people that configure it and run it. So the hardware is no good without those folks. So.
All right. So current threat landscape, Brad.
So the threat landscape is always moving and changing, but we're seeing that it's starting to do so exponentially faster. You really need to reevaluate what your risks are, reevaluate what your threat landscape is in your threat environment, and find out, what is our risk appetite based on this changing environment, and make sure you communicate that to leadership. Make sure that they realize it's a scary world out there. We need to do what we can to protect ourselves from it. One of the big things we're seeing that has us on edge, and we've been doing a lot of research here internally at CI on this, is AI. It used to be you would get a phishing email from PayPal and half the words were misspelled and the logo was wrong and it was really bad. AI will write a perfect phishing email, and there's guardrails for AI, right? It'll say, I can't tell you how to make a nuclear bomb. I can't write you a phishing email, but it's very easy to trick that. Even without loading any special stuff, just the way you phrase your questions, you can trick it into writing you a phishing email. There are a lot of deepfakes coming out, both audio and video. There were some individuals, I believe it was their granddaughter, was supposedly kidnapped. They got a phone call from their granddaughter in her voice saying, I've been kidnapped, please pay them. It wasn't their granddaughter. AI, she had like some videos out somewhere. They were able to sample her voice enough to get AI to create that conversation in her voice. And the grandparents fell for it. I mean, it was their granddaughter's voice. They paid the ransom. Turned out she was fine. She wasn't kidnapped or anything. We're seeing a lot of deep fakes in videos. Eventually, you're not going to get a text message from your hospital administrator asking you to go buy Apple gift cards. You're going to get a video message from them where it's them and they're moving around and they're speaking to you saying, hey, go buy these gift cards. Very, very, very kind of scary situation that we could be rolling into. So, it's like Reagan said, trust but verify. You can trust that you got something from the hospital administrator, but verify. Call them up. Find out a way to see them and say, hey, did you really send this video? Because it's super convincing.
I'm curious for folks in the audience, and you can just put your answer in the chat as Brad talks about, the new AI threats. Have you started to warn your staff about, more advanced threats that come from AI? I know, I get all sorts of phishing emails that are definitely written by ChatGPT. So keep going, Brad. Yeah, it looks like people are, they've started to warn people about this. Yeah, it's a real,
and we see this all the time, not only here, but with our clients as well. It's really starting to ramp up. And so it's something to definitely keep an eye on. A lot of phishing is still going on. And the reason that we're seeing a lot of phishing is now AI is making it way easier. And B, phishing works. I just did security awareness training for a municipality on the West Coast, and we did the whole security awareness training. We talked about phishing in depth. And the very next day, I got an email from them saying, hey, we just had like 14 phishing attempts come in from this particular area, and with this particular thing going on. It happens. I mean, it happens all the time. Like, that was perfect timing. It came right up. They thought it was a test. It wasn't. It was real phishing. Easy to do. Cost bad actors pennies to send out 1 million phishing emails. All they need is that one click. And then finally, nation states are becoming a lot bolder. You've all seen the news lately, Chinese planes flying across the nose of ours, or boats cutting each other off. Russia with some of the things that they're doing in Ukraine. Nation states are becoming much more bolder. It used to be kind of, behind the scenes, but now it's much more out in the open. They don't care that we're able to, perform attrition and trace something back to China. China's like, yeah, we did it. What are you going to do? So just know that nation states are also ramping up a little bit as well. So what to know? Attacks against healthcare are not only ongoing, but they're increasing at a rapid rate. Be very aware. Make sure that your folks know. And when I say your folks, I don't mean your individual teams. I mean the whole hospital or healthcare system you work for. If they see something, let people know, because local teams are still your first line of defense. They're going to see this stuff first. they're going to be the ones that are going to act on it and be able to stop the threat before it infiltrates.
And
again,
one of the and Brad, one of the things that I know, because you don't know yet, is that we have our healthcare breach report coming out, and I will tell you, one of the things we saw last year was it looked like there was a dip in attacks, and that's gone. What the first thing here, attacks against healthcare organizations are not ongoing, but increasing. They're increasing in different ways. They're increasing on third-party risk. They're increasing in a number of different ways. And the bad guys focusing on new vulnerabilities. So, we'll have that breach report coming out, but that's just a, quick preview of it. Sorry, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, that's really good. And that's the one thing I really love about working for CIs. We do have all this information that we just provide out to people. We want to make the world a better place for our kids and our grandkids. And that's kind of our goal here in presenting this information to everybody. So the big thing is, if you see something, say something. Let somebody know, hey, there's something weird going on here. I got this funny looking text message. Let somebody know so that we can dive into it and find out. Jake got one earlier this week and said, hey, I got this weird text message. What do you think of this? And we found out it was just a mistake. Somebody actually put Jake's name instead of the person they're trying to text. But it's always good to say something. I would much rather reach out to somebody and say, hey, it's nothing, you don't need to worry about it, than have somebody not say anything and it leads to a breach of us. Threat actors, they're stepping up their game continuously. They're learning, they're evolving, just like we do. We learn and evolve every day. So do the bad actors, unfortunately. So that threat landscape is constantly evolving and shifting on us. So we really need to keep an eye on that and figure out what that threat landscape looks like to each of you and each of your organizations. And threats can and often do exist where we're not looking. This isn't really healthcare, but there was a government agency down in Guam, and they got popped because they weren't scanning the Windows temp directory with their tooling that looked for threats. So the bad actors uploaded everything into the Windows temp directory, and it was never discovered because they weren't looking there. So turn over rocks, look for bugs, look for worms, look for viruses, any kind of malware, because it's going to be under those rocks.
And going real quick, going back on this for 1 second, Mike, you study the threat landscape all the time. For folks who don't know, Mike sends out the Daily Blast, which is he every Monday through Friday sends out an email that has everything that's happened in the last 24 hours. Mike, what are you seeing? What kinds of attacks are you seeing on a daily basis?
So here's how I boil this down, because I think very simply about things from like a 30. So everything.
Did we lose Mike? Or
Oops, no, I got a button. So here's how a bad thing starts. A user runs over a booby-trapped website, plus or minus being drawn to that, right? A watering hole attack. You get your network broken into because you didn't patch something that's facing the internet. You get phished. Somebody gives up a password, or it's a third party that's been compromised that ends up having some kind of trust relationship that gets leveraged to take you. Okay. Those are the ways in general that these things start, right? And so what are the impacts from these things? Well, it's unauthorized disclosure of protected records. It's theft through business email compromise and other, stealing your CPU time with cryptocurrency mining, whatever. It's extortion through ransomware, through records theft, holding your records in abeyance until you pay, the extortion demand. You get your records back, or an assurance they're deleted. You just get knocked down for the sake of getting knocked down, which we're starting to see more of. Or you become that third party that's used to launch attacks elsewhere. All right. So that's how it starts. That's how it lands. And then there's the business side of that. It's going to impact patient care. It's going to impact revenue. We will get fined. Brand damage, all of these things. That's how I see it going down. And those are all the common ways. But lately, to your question, the one that has taken over is when there is a vulnerability announced in a piece of software that faces the internet, the scanning will start 5 minutes later to find every exposure of that. The patch will be reverse engineered and weaponized into an exploit immediately. So, when we're talking about, kind of, the 5 common mistakes here, I like to connect those to those commonly used methods. Is that an exhaustive list? No, but it's the 95% list. Okay. So, number one, not implementing guidance from Health and Human Services. That puts you in regulatory danger. When they say your annual HIPAA risk assessment will now be conducted within this cybersecurity framework, do that. Do that. You may have been using some spreadsheet method or something. Do what they tell you to do. Number two, not looking into good third-party insurance that Fred talked about. Or doing good third-party risk management, because third parties, and I think this is going to come out in the healthcare data breach report that we're about to publish, third parties are the cause of a whole lot of this. One of Brad's examples was some company that got popped, and all of a sudden, all of their customers had to start, filing data breach notifications. Not making security front and center in procurement. Right. And so I can make specific references here to the software bill of materials and the IoT labeling that the federal government is going to do. All that needs to be taken into consideration when you're buying stuff. Big one, using permissive policies, especially regarding internet use. 40% of the compromised assets in the city of Seattle were due to the use of personal email. Why are you letting people use personal email in a hospital situation? Okay. Not continuously training your users. And then again, because this business about vulnerabilities being weaponized very quickly, not treating a high severity alert regarding a vulnerability as an incident, stopping what you are doing, putting all the compensating controls in place until you have that patch, getting that patch applied, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the ones that I think map to the common techniques. Right. It was all embedded in everything Brad said, but that's the way I boil it down.
Yeah, and I think those are all super important. And then in terms of what to do with your organization, Brad, you're going to go to the next slide and talk about helping folks one, pay attention to this framework, but we sort of break it down in 3 categories: preparing for attack, detecting, and responding. And and Fred, when you think about what folks need, and what organizations need, and look, this is our list of I run marketing. This is our list of services. But at the same time, you can think about your organization in these 3 categories, because when Fred and I talk to hospitals, talk to CFOs and the like, we say you got to break down your spending between preparing for an attack, detecting one quickly, and being able to respond decisively. If you just focus on preparation, it doesn't work, right, Fred?
Yeah, that's the key. It's you got to have all of these components in place. They can't work independently of one another. So your preparation phase is, policies, it's training, it's tabletop exercises, it's plans, it's knowing your insurance is in place, right? All those components, assessments, right? The detection is your eyes, right? It's your monitoring of your systems, looking at your entire attack surface. There's a new kind of term we're using a lot now called attack surface management. That means it's not just your vulnerabilities on your external facing IP addresses. It's also the fact that you maybe have some of your users whose accounts have been compromised in other places, and now those password and accounts are in have I been pwned, or on the dark web somewhere. So there's DNS. You need to make sure your DNS is appropriately being secured now. People typo squat on a one-off, of your name, and then send phishing emails. So it's not just, hey, I got to run a vulnerability scan and a pen test anymore. I've got to know what's out there, what's happening in the world around my identities, my emails, my DNS. All of these components now are part of managing that. So having these ability to detect what is going on when any of these particular things fail is a key component. And of course, responding as rapidly as possible is the key to a successful response. The better trained, the better prepared you are, the faster you detect, and the better your detections are, the more effective your response will be. So response, of course, is everything from I need to shut that asset down from attacking other systems. The ability to go and isolate that or an identity rapidly. That's become table stakes now. A lot of people are looking at it and saying, maybe we should just quarantine things ahead of time and then figure out if it's really a bad thing or not. Because having a system shut down for a little bit, it's not nearly as bad as having them all shut down for 2 weeks, right? So having ability to take initial action, to then jump in with people to investigate, to determine what happened, to manage recovery and the response phase, key components as well. So we kind of see this as all the things you need to have put in place to have a robust security program.
And you remember back in the beginning of this where Brad said, one of the things that people really do well is when you're in the middle of an audit, you're doing, you're on it, right? Well, I mean, we all know we always want to be on it. And one of the things that I've seen is, a really good risk assessment, or working with a VC. So like Brad, but those have roadmaps where you're always on it, right, Fred?
Yeah, and the one thing here's the plus and minus. Having a roadmap's critical. When we're doing a report, the roadmap is the key, frankly, I believe the key part of the deliverable, and it needs to be written specifically for you and your organization. Having a laundry list of best practices, well, anybody can go download that, right? It's got to be what is most important to you, what kind of solutions are applicable to your budget, the character of your organization, the size of your staff, right? So a very focused, personalized, if you will, roadmap is a key component to any of this stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let me jump in just a little bit too,
Good, Mike.
because you guys are kind of snapping around the edges of this, but I'm just going to say it. So the prepare, detect, respond, what this does is it addresses the two terms that make up risk. So when you prepare, you are lowering the likelihood that a bad thing happens. Right? What's a bad thing? Records disclosure, theft, extortion, disruption, those things I went through. And you will, have a roadmap, and you will say, we are constantly going to improve, and we're going to make sure that we are getting all of our prevention in place and prevent. And this is a foreseeable event. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. When you are up against, organized criminals that have had really long time to evolve their techniques and get really good at those, and nation states now, because of, global geopolitics, are starting to bleed over into our critical infrastructure. You need to limit the impact of that foreseeable event. And the way that you do that, after you're working on your prevention and you've got your roadmap and you're continuously improving, but man, you need to detect what has gone wrong, and you need to put out the grease fire on the stove before the house, in this case, a hospital, is engulfed in flames. So, again, I think about things really simply. You invest in prevention to lower the likelihood of a bad thing, and then you invest in detection and response to make sure that when the bad thing happens, it doesn't you can turn it into a tree falling into a forest very quickly. It's okay if the help desk cleans up somebody's workstation because they tripped over a booby-trapped website. It's not okay when the FBI calls and says, hey, all of your patient records are for sale online. Right? You get to pick which one of those you end up as by how you treat this whole risk expression throughout prepare, detect, and respond.
And the American Hospital Association. So for those of you who don't know, the American Hospital Association, hired a guy named John Rigi, who was who worked at the FBI, to come to the American Hospital Association to make recommendations to hospitals. And one of the things he did is he created a program called the Preferred Cybersecurity Service Program. And he's chosen different companies to do different things. And for us, we talk to him, and these are the things that the AHA recommends, with us: managed detection response, those risk assessments, that vulnerability identification, and incident response planning. Same stuff that Fred and Mike just told you about. So, and when we went to, and by the way, when we went to that, the American Hospital Association conference that was just down the street here in Seattle, and John spoke, he spoke along with the CIO of a hospital that had got hit by ransomware. And, he told a harrowing story of what happened. Anybody want to guess? Go ahead and put in chat. They got hit by ransomware, rural hospital. What was the cost? 2 million, 5 million, 7 million, 10 million, what was the cost? It's 10 million. It's 10 million to, was their total cost of getting hit by ransomware. So, the whole goal is to be in this together and, and avoid that happening. Before I'm going to ask for final thoughts from Brad and Mike and Fred here. And while I do, if people want to put questions in the chat, go ahead. The other thing I want to do is ask folks, whenever we do these webinars, right? Sometimes, folks want to catch up with us afterwards. My colleague Jenny is going to put a link to book a meeting with us. Brad's available, and we'll make Mike and Fred available as well. But my colleague Jenny will put two things in the chat. One is a link to book a meeting with us if you want to chat. And the other is, if you've ever been to our webinars before, I care deeply about this. We love your take. Was this useful? Was this helpful? She's going to put a survey in the chat. I would love it if everybody would take the survey. That would be really, really, really helpful. And in particular, I want to thank Anthony, who called this an excellent webinar. So Anthony, thank you. All right, let's do final thoughts. Brad, we're going to start with you, then Mike, then Fred. Brad, final thoughts.
Yeah. So my final thoughts on this, we talked about some scary stuff. None of it is insurmountable. We're all in this together. And, the biggest takeaway from this is not, it shouldn't be the world is scary. It should be, there are ways that you can protect yourselves. Here's some things you might not have thought of that might, you could take this away from this webinar today and maybe look into those options.
All right, Mike.
I think one of the most important things that we hit on was the role of executives here, and ensuring that there is some kind of governance committee organization within your organization so that identified risks can be communicated. You can ask for resources. They can get turned down. As time goes on and we're seeing what the Federal Trade Commission and the SEC and things like this are doing, they're going to get the message. You need to have that governance organization so that fingerprints are on your, request to mitigate risk, so that they don't end up landing on you.
Fred, final thought.
Yeah. The 5 common avoidable mistakes, I look at those as kind of philosophical principles that you should apply whenever you're thinking about your security. Am I, taking into account the total cost of ownership, all the things it takes to run this? All these kinds of things we talked about here can be, every time you're making a decision, run through those and say, am I satisfying these particular things, or am I actually falling into these same mistakes I've made previously?
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Remember, if you want to book a meeting, hit that Calendly link. I really, really would love it if everybody would take the survey link. One thing I forgot to mention is we do donate to an InfoSec charity when folks take the survey. So please take the survey. 1, we'll donate to a charity on your behalf. But 2, as a favor to me, I'd love the feedback. It's really helpful. So we'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great August since it just started. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.